Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for this privilege, HPH, to be in conversation with Vikas Kumar. And Vikas, I also want to add my thank yous to all the work that you have done all these years. And I feel a little overwhelmed to be sitting here and conducting this talk with you in conversation, but I feel privileged to be having this opportunity to further engage with you on this work of yours. And this is, of course, about what we've said is not the first of your works with Nagaland. And this afternoon, the little time that I have, I think about 20 or 25 minutes, I would like to specifically bring out the highlights of this book, which will appeal to readers here and outside of Nagaland as well. And I see this conversation this afternoon in 3 different sections. I would like to ask you, what should readers take away from the book? And I'll be more specific in that in my questions with you. And secondly, the second section is, you've written a lot in the last 10 years on the making of the peace process, but not having actually written specifically on the origins of the peace process as a large chapter or as an article as such. But yet your writings, they do refer to the chapters in the history of the Naga political talks. Thirdly, I also wanted to ask you, since with your vast experience in travel and interaction with a wide group of people in Nagaland, what are the what do you see are some of the uniting factors that can bring the Nagas together? I know you don't want to give any definite conclusions in your research, but to begin with, why did you decide to come to Nagaland and do this first book, Numbers in Periphery?
So, as a student in 1997, I joined Kanpur IIT, and I was a student at that time when the first ceasefire was done. In fact, the first ceasefire was done in the week I joined Kanpur IIT. So we read about this in newspapers, and then I started thinking about the conflict. So I was about 17 years old at that time, right? So the first conclusion which struck me, and you should remember that this was the time when Samuel Huntington has published his extremely influential Clash of Civilizations. So we all were reading that and thinking. The first thing which struck me was that maybe the conflict is because the plains people are Hindus and the hills people are Christians. But then I said, I have so many Christians around in Kanpur or Delhi, so Christianity may not be the explanation. So then I said, maybe they speak a different language. I mean, they use English as the official language. But then soon I learned that there are actually at least 16, 17 languages spoken there. So then that might not be the thing. So then I said, maybe it is because the people use Roman script to write their languages. So I kept on expanding ad hoc explanations here and there, and did write occasional pieces in the mainstream, Nikhil Chakrabarti's journal. But at one point of time, it struck me that I have gotten it all wrong. And that was the time when Sanjay Hazarika did an interview of nephew Rio. So 2001 to 2005, I was an engineer working in the industry, every day for power plants. 2005, I returned to the academia, and after my first semester, in the semester break, Sanjay Hazarika did an interview of nephew Rio, and we talked about this statistical problem that the state's 2001 census has highly overestimated the entire head count. So then I said, but how can you get the head count wrong? This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Why can you? So then I said, maybe these people did not do it properly. Anyway, so I forgot that. But at that time, it struck me for the first time that I have been dealing with ad hoc ways of looking at the problem. I need to understand things in a more systematic manner. So for next 5 years, I did not touch Nagaland at all. Nothing about Nagaland, either in my writings or works, etc. 2011, the census, when the census data came out and the population contracted, I went back to the interview and said, there's something real going on here. You cannot ignore it any longer. So, but I said, because it is only about counting people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So I said, I'll go to the state. It'll take about a week or 2 weeks, and I'll understand what's gone wrong. And after the first conversation, Kohima for 2 hours, I said, this needs much more time. Right? So I said, but the fact that the modern state uses statistics as the primary medium for engaging with people, right? No Sarkari document moves without some statistical input. Every seat, every ration card, Aadhaar, So this is a new language. This is a language which is used by all states in the world, right? So then I said that why is it the case? And then I also did the public consultation note of 2009 in which everybody said that it's not only 2001, in fact even the earlier censuses are flawed. So I said, if for 2-3 decades a problem has been festering and the Census of India does not even acknowledge it, the government of India does not acknowledge it, there's something seriously wrong there. And if this habit of not looking at things is there in the hills, you can call it an exceptional place, but once it becomes a habit, it will affect every one of us, Uttar Pradesh, Bengal, Delhi, everywhere. So I have to understand, why are they ignoring this problem? So I started engaging with this, and then I realized that, that there's a larger context, the numbers. So I said, so my first book's conclusion is that the data deficit of Nagaland is intertwined with the democracy and development deficits. I cannot talk about data deficit in isolation from the democracy deficit. I cannot talk about data deficit in isolation from the development deficit. And then I went on to show that this is not a uniquely Naga problem. In several other states of India, you have this problem. In fact, when somebody said that this happens only in Nagaland, I said, why are you reducing an institutional problem to an ethnic problem? So then that was actually, and I'm sort of indebted for that comment because that triggered my work of Kashmir, where the statistics are even more flawed. Right? And then I argue that wherever in the world you have a data, wherever in the world where you have a democracy deficit and data and development deficit, you will have data deficit as well. Right? So this was my, so I said, we cannot, so the general tendency in the national academia and media is to say, oh, this is Nagaland, this is Kashmir, so these are exceptional places. It can happen there, but not to us. So I showed in my work that the problems, the reasons why it happened here are also available in many other parts of India. This is not the only part of the country where there is a democracy deficit. There is a democracy deficit in the slums of Bombay. There is a democracy deficit maybe in Jammu, in Punjab, in so many places, in Chhattisgarh. So this is not a Naga problem. This is our problem. In fact, I also reached out to friends in other countries and saying that this is not a problem that and we found that in Nigeria, Pakistan, in so many places we face a similar problem. So for me, it was important the moment I hit upon this thing that, well, this is a problem, a consequence of an institutional failure, of the democracy deficit. Then it became a larger project that I have to engage with this, as not only as an academic but also as a citizen. I have to hold, the government accountable. That if civil society after another from Dimapur, Kohima, or fake, they are sending you letters that they are not happy with the head count, the way it has been done. So then you have to come out with this statement. You just cannot say that we have received the letter, right? So therefore, So I, didn't so. But you see, my initial idea of engagement was extremely infantile, I will say. I thought it will take me 2 weeks. It has already taken you 10 years, and now I know, but I do not know. At least now I know, but I do not know. Right. The other thing was that I thought that I will, do this study in a small constituency. So I'll go to Saudi constituency Mokokchung and then compare the head count with the church registers and then come to a clear idea. But very soon when I met, Reverend Anjo Kikum, who was the General Secretary of NBCC, so he explained to me the difficulties of doing this, right? Now, this was the least I had expected. This was not what I had expected from a church figure. I thought he wouldn't, but he actually spent time on statistics. He explained that why church statistics cannot be straight away used to do demographic comparison, right? So the NBCC was extremely helpful in terms of sharing 20 years old data with me of different years, how many congregations and what there. So that also has been part of that first book. So it has been so when I saw that different people are coming together with different stories, so I said now it is my duty at least to tell the stories because they have given their time to me, they have given their affection to me. So this is the least I can do to put together their stories in the form of a book and bring it out for people to see. And so that's how very roundabout way of saying how I came to this book.
But of course, that book then led you to look further into the issues of
Yes.
Nagaland. And today we want to now talk about this waiting for a Christmas gift. And of course, Christmas gift is something that Nagas are all familiar with in terms of the political parlance. But in this book, you have gone into great lengths. You've already told us the arrangements that were made back and forth for the front cover. But what I find particularly engaging is the images that you have used, the photographs, and rarely do we see, books that talk about the political situation or articles that talk about the situation in Nagaland, reflecting some of these images. And these are images that have been collected over a decade or so. And why particularly were you drawn towards, inputting these?
So before that, I'll say something about the title of this book. So in 2012, when I first came here, a politician said that he will solve all problems by the coming Christmas. So I was deeply impressed. I said he's so confident that he has done his homework and he's giving a specific date that by this date everything will be taken care of. So but then that Christmas came and went, and there's so many Christmases. So that sort of I said then people started joking about that Christmas gifts. Right? So that's how the title came out. Now about the use of images here. See, we often, when one of the things that I notice in national media as well as the academia, that people use a set number of images. There'll be images of people dressed in tribal attire, right, and etc. Every tourism brochure of the state government or central government presents people in their quote unquote tribal attire. They don't present the diversity and the newer forms of expression, engagement there. So I said, people are, are being fed with stereotypes. But I want to capture what I saw, and I didn't see what I saw in the tourism brochures, right? So I, started, the thought that I'll share a small number of images, at least one or two images in every chapter, so that people can add a human face to the place instead of stereotypical image of the state. So I have brought in figures from all parts of the state, from eastern Nagaland, from different parts, and this is to allow readers both inside and sort of, because there are certain images here with the people inside the state perhaps do not give sufficient attention to. And there are many more images here which people from outside haven't seen. They come to Konoma and to that Kisama village and they go back. Right? But there's much more to the state here. And so I wanted to capture the graffiti, the posters of Eastern Naga Students Federation, our sense of telling Dimapur.
Did you also see that these posters and graffitis were in some instances used to express views and opinions by the community concerned, which they could not say directly, perhaps, to another community or tribe, which is.
That is true. See, I take all the posters of whichever organization they are very seriously, because this is an attempt to engage in a public conversation. Now, when I'm driving through Dimapur and I see an ASTD poster saying that flying in luxurious vehicles in bad roads is not a sign of development, I see this as an attempt of the ASTD to engage us in a conversation about what should be development. Right? So I cannot just ignore. So for me, these are extremely important forms. Or, the Eastern Naga Students Federation talking about food security, talking about, so I take it as serious conversation because they are drawing our attention to a problem which is increasingly important, that climate change has made agriculture very precarious, and these are areas where a large proportion of the population still depends on agriculture. So they are trying to draw out a very important point. They are saying that we need to think about this, right? There'll be disagreements about how to address the problem, but at least there's a conversation happening. So I think that these are very, in fact, or there are, posters and newspaper advertisements. I brought out some newspaper advertisements also here. So I think, we need to, which is why for me the idea of literature is much larger. It is not only the formal books which come out of, presses. Everyday speeches, every, posters are also part of it.
Wait, your articles, they are all chronologically written in, but every chapter in the book actually deserves a deeper conservation and analysis. But at the moment when we want, as an author of this book and as a labor of your work for 10 years and fighting with editors in the Deccan Herald, the Hindu, the Wire, and other public publications outside, to fight for the space to put these articles on. What do you see? What do you want readers to take away from this? How do you see this work? What would you like us readers to take away?
I wouldn't use the word fight. It's a kind of a conversation that how to. Why is it important? How is it important in that sense? And so yes, but I think the first thing that readers should take away from this book is that people make mistakes. If you read my first few articles, there will be mistakes there, and they have been preserved here, right? So people make mistakes, we make mistakes, and we should accept ourselves with all our mistakes and learn from them, of course, and not repeat them. So I hopefully haven't repeated the mistakes of some of the earlier articles. And the other thing is that we need to appreciate also some of the complexities before we question some of the attempts which are being made to address problems. Sometimes we fail to appreciate the difficulties which people face. For instance, for myself, I did not appreciate the difficulties with the Directorate of Census Operations faces while conducting census here. It's only after many conversations with them that I understood that they have a very difficult position, and they're trying to do the best within their constraints. So I think this book, also tries to bring out a lot of these constraints, and it sort of humanizes the problem, the political problem, instead of making it more, bringing in newer dimensions. For instance, what will this 21st century agreement solution hold for women in the state? Right? They are the ones who have suffered a lot, irrespective whether they are Ao, Angami, or whichever type they are. What will this agreement eventually do to them? Will it address their concern? Will it accommodate them? Right? What will this agreement do to laborers, daily wage laborers? There's a large number of people in the state who are now handless. Now, what will this agreement do to those landless laborers? So I've been trying to this book is you should learn that that there are many constituencies which we have traditionally excluded from public conversations. We need to bring them on, whether they are smaller tribes, Naga, non-Naga, whether they're women, whether they are landless, daily wage laborers, all kinds of people. So I would like this to be the key takeaway, that we have made a lot of effort. We are really frustrated with 20 years of negotiation, but perhaps there's much more hard work to be done to bring in more voices which have been excluded from the process.
Yeah, so you've in your walk through this state, you've met with so many groups of people and individuals. And what are some of the startling observations or differences that you have had? That some lessons that you have learned, because you said Nagaland has taught you, but we would also like to know what are some of the divergent views, but which actually they stand out for you, and which are possibly some things that are in the book, and there are some lessons that we as readers, we as Naga people also need to take away and keep with us. Are there some things which you have seen missing in the peace process? Of course, you just mentioned the landless and the women, which are extremely important sections of our society. But otherwise, what are some of the in your interactions? What are some of the things that stand out for you, which was different from, which were maybe on opposite sides, but yet speaking of the same problem?
There are three things I think which I should highlight. The first thing is that I want to see, as a person, as a human being, rather than as an academic, I'd like to see much more conversation happening in the state. People don't talk to each other. A lot of people, so people, across the tribes, across districts, across political parties, often they don't talk to each other. I think there's much more conversation needed, A. The B, we also need much more conversation across different generations. Right now, 80-year-old people are discussing the future of 18-year-old people, right? Some of them, this agreement, whenever it happens, will have to be lived by these 18-year-old people, right? Now, an 80-year-old people who does not know how to handle an Android phone is going to decide the future of an Android generation. I think, we need much more conversation. We often keep on talking about conversation between New Delhi and Kohima, or Kohima and Impal, etc. But there's much more conversation that each one of us, including me, needs at home, in our homes, across different generations. I've seen, I have not written about this, but I will, sooner than later write about this. There are 4 generations that we have here, and those 4 generations are not talking as much as they should be talking to each other. So the people who are in the 80s, those who are 60s and in that bracket, and then 40s and 50s, and then 20s and teens. So, and I've seen that each one of them has a very different understanding. They have, each one of them, is committed to their culture, to their heritage. they love their identity, but they have very different ways of understanding the way forward. So I think, that would be the second thing which I learned from this conversation. The third thing which I learned is that often Naga people don't appreciate their own achievements. They have achieved what very few across entire South Asia have achieved. How many? See, the population of the state is about 20 lakhs. Right? Now 20 lakhs is the population of a small district in mainland. How many districts of India have an HPH-like publishing house? Go around and see. How many districts of India have 4 English dailies coming out every day without fail for a decade or more longer? How many, districts of India, have a kind of indigenously developed local, devolution scheme like BDB, whatever. Now, BDB scheme has its own problems. All of us are aware of it, but there was an attempt at that. How many districts of India can claim that? How many districts of India can claim to have, someone like Charles Tracy, a truly exceptional person? Right? He's even in 1999 he was far ahead of his time. Now, how many districts can claim that? How many districts can claim to have Temshula Ao and Eastern Hire? See, these are so there's so many things I can keep on going about, but the thing is that the fact is that that we have to also, while we have to feel strongly about things that we haven't been able to achieve, but we should also appreciate some of the things that we already achieved. And the state has indeed achieved a lot in terms of your intellectual accomplishments, in terms of the cultural, the kind of strong civil society. See, we often see the civil society here, sometimes we see them as an impediment. But my understanding, and I'm developing it over the years, I've not published this, is that this is perhaps, this desire to build a consensus, right, is one of these trends of the state. Right, so in every village I have gone, there are 10 different organizations: students organization, youth organization, women, church this, church that, hundreds of these things. Right now, this kind of very large network of interpenetrating civil societies. See, there's a youth network, and then there's a students association. And then there's third, there's a church youth networks. So for the same segment of population, there are 3 intersecting organizations. Right now, this combination of large number of intersecting organizations, this is what actually gives the strength to the society. Now, we should, instead of only criticizing them, we should actually see them as a source of strength, but also improve them, because a lot of them have not conducted themselves to the highest standards which I sort of expected of them. But then it's important to note that the way power sharing happens at the village level is extremely important. How many societies would have withstood the large scale violence for an extended period which this society has seen? I mean, we have only heard of this, but some of you here have seen it firsthand. How many districts of India can claim to have a Naga association? 1984, when they came up, it was a very difficult period in the history. The fact that they stepped out and they could do so much. Right? Of course, there have been ups and downs in their history, and every organization has these ups and downs. But the fact that in the most difficult of times they could come together and do that, how many districts of India can claim to have women's organization which operated successfully for about 20 plus years? So there's a lot. So therefore, we need to appreciate this. We have seen every village there. The other thing being, every village has a strong identity. Yeah. Now, sometimes this identity comes in the way building unity, but at a local level, you see, there's a youth football competition. There's a church football competition. Then a political party organized football competition. So much is happening. People are meeting again and again. There's a very strong interconnection. I think this is a very strong, important thing.
Yes, you say all that, but at the same time, you did say that more conversations need to take place now. Uh, Charles, in his foreword, also had said that this is it's very helpful in the sense it's an outsider, viewing us and has outsider insider view, which is very very objectively written. But to improve this conversation, how does a society, how do you think Naga society can improve this conversation within on these very urgent and pressing topics that are upon us politically?
See, the conversations which I said earlier, which began in late 1940s, they came to an abrupt end with the killing of with the unfortunate death of Sakre, right? Had that continued, I mean, the level of engagement in those conversations, you have to read some of the letters, with that generation sent to New Delhi. New Delhi was struck because they were accustomed to the idea of tribe being at a lower social pedestal, and they were accustomed that people who are at the lower social pedestal, they don't have that intellectual refinement. And here is Sakre, a first generation writer. Here is K.V. Chusa, first generation, educated. So these, profound statements on nationhood, on statehood, on international law, on history coming. So they believe this must have been the handiwork of the Christian missionaries of the American Baptist Church. Right? So that was the scale and level at which, the conversation was happening. But that unfortunate death actually sort of cut short the tradition of public debate in a way. Again, in 1990s, when Chaliye K.V. Chusa lost his life, that would have sent a very chilling message to people. As somebody, as again a very accomplished, writer. I've gone through some of his older editorials, and the prose is exemplary. The way he expresses very complex issues in simple language is absolutely fantastic. But when such a person loses his life, it has an impact, right? I have read every speech of Chief Minister of the state published from 69 to 2016, 17, each and every speech, right? And you can see that there's a general decline in the quality of prose. General decline there, right? And so you see, to sometimes, this kind of incident, So I was very happy when Account, became active. I saw them as with all their flaws and whatever shortcomings, they were promoting public debate. Every day, the first thing I do is to read Morung Express. That is the first thing I do early in the morning, right? Whether I am able to read every news, but that's a different thing, but I do open the first page, the editorial page, and see what's going on. So I think, you already have the platforms there. People have to use them a little more. So, and that fear has to go away. Fortunately, that fear is actually going away for all of us. The new generation who are in 20s, they are really not prepared to fear. They're not afraid of anybody. They're asking questions which would not have been asked even 2012. I've got youngsters saying, well, I have doubts about whether this Simon Commission memorandum represented our aspirations as a whole of Nagaland. I've got youngsters saying that I am not sure what 99.99% of the plebiscite meant. I said, for me, it's not whether it is 99.99, 99.9. For me, it is important that somebody stood up and said, I want to be heard, and then you make up your mind. Right? So I said, that's fine. So now this new generation is asking questions about everything. Right? The new generation, for instance, Andemos, cartoons in newspapers, they are asking profound questions. questions. You cannot ignore them. The new generation is asking questions, putting questions to the church, something that the previous generation would not have done in this way. Right? So I think, they already have beginning. We need to give this new generation more space. We have a little more deference to the age. I was in a conversation where a senior person spoke, and the next speaker, he said, my senior has already said everything, so I don't need to say anything. So, that's not the case. So this culture of, intellectual deference has to be discarded, and unfortunately the new generation is actually doing, raising issues. I was with the Gordon Graham Prize last year thing, and I came out with fantastic entries. The way Senti Long Ozukim, deals with church is not the way that the previous generation would have held with it, right? The way View Po from that side of the state, he talks about the army or the army trucks passing. So this new generation is doing, so I think, maybe we have to wait for a little while, but some of these conversations will happen. But at least what the older generation can do is to give more space to them. Right? Every time something happens in the state, the first 2 days there will be serious opinion pieces. And then from the third day, the standard opinion piece is that we are not being good Christians. Now, for any problem, the conclusion is that we are not true Christians, we have strayed from the path. So I think, and then once the flag of Christianity is raised, so then people stop asking serious questions. We need to separate the institutional, some of the public problems from personal faith, and not allow the faith to. But some of the finest opinion pieces which are also here were published during the anti-women's reservation movement. Some of them are absolutely fantastic, and these are the opinion pieces which make me hopeful. Some of the two op-eds, which our friend Khum wrote at that time, are absolutely fantastic. So, irrespective of all the gloom, all the waiting, etc., I am hopeful that the people who are doing these opinion pieces, these editorials, they will definitely find a solution, even if the 80-year-old people continue to defer the solution.
But to do justice to what Ma'am Mona Lisa had said earlier on the media, there are definitely some things that we would like to take the opportunity of you today here and suggest, because the way we do the research, the way we conduct our surveys, the way we find out the people we should engage with relevant to the topic, to the issues, perhaps there are some things that, you would want to, just as an aside in this conversation today. Yeah.
See, one of the ways in which the news media here has operated is that, news media, a large part of it is a handout. So half of it comes from politicians and state government, half of it comes from the different civil society organizations, right? And then, there's this opinion space. The opinion space is entirely dominated by a few people who hold strong opinions, of course, but who represent this or that faction society in here, and sometimes all kinds of opinions are allowed to be published, which is fair. But some of these things need critical comment as well. But the problem is that the opinion space, even though there are 4 newspapers, all newspapers on that day published the same opinion piece. I think the newspaper editor should come to an agreement that we will publish the opinion piece only in one newspaper and use the space in the other 3 newspapers to give space to others. Right? So that's required. The other thing is that, there's no investigation. Right? I think in one of our editorials, Mona Lisa Hankiza asked, who has the kind of money required to keep a public bandh going on for 7 days in a row? Now, this would have needed further investigation that who is financing all this, right? The media, I remember a very interesting, poignant piece in Sharat Peer's book on Kashmir where he says that lakhs of people come to the funeral of slain militants and they are hailed as heroes. But 1 week later, you go to their house and nobody asks where their parents are getting the next meal from. 3 people died on that day, unfortunate deaths. Young people who had a bright future, I'm sure. They lost their lives, and the organizations which brought these people on the streets, has anyone gone back to their house and asked what are their parents doing? What are their younger siblings doing? So I think we need to have a lot more investigation going on these things. How come ragtags who have expressed praise for this civil society a little while ago, but then there's also the case that in a matter of few weeks a new organization comes up and then holds the entire state to ransom. We need to investigate who is behind that. We have to see, because it's our duty to bring to people that, well, you are deeply moved by the opinions being expressed there, but you should understand what is the context of this, who is bringing out, right? So I think a lot more investigation has to happen there as well. The other thing is that I guess one of the constraints is that you have a news media entirely in English, except for a few small newspapers in Hagamis, in Lutha and Ao and other languages. This becomes a handicap. You see, English is a language which has been acquired as a second or third language. I have already mentioned that from 1969 onwards to 2016-17, there has been a decline in the quality of prose of the speeches that I have seen, right? And there's a decline in quality of the memorandum which with 1945-55 generation sent, and which the current NSCNs and whatever hand out. So this is very clear that English, though is the official language, though it is part of the church and everything else, it is not the favored medium of expression. Right? If you want to enrich the news media, if you want to bring in more voices, we have to also promote the vernacular, quote unquote, vernacular medium, who's as well. So, which is why in this book I have 2 pieces on vernacular press as well, because I think if you don't do that, you leave out a very large section of your population.
Right. So could you compare like the situation in Nagaland as far as having having the media, the medium of the media in a vernacular language, which shapes the thoughts and unites the people's thoughts. And we compare the situation in Nagaland with its neighboring states like Assam or even Manipur or even Mizoram. Do you see how the advantage is there when it comes to political issues and reflecting the views of a people as one united view when you have the advantage of a vernacular medium?
It definitely see when you compare Nagaland with, for instance, Mizoram, there's a huge difference. Mizoram has a very strong vernacular press, an extremely large vernacular publishing industry, even though it has a smaller population compared to Nagaland, right? That's the thing. In Mizoram, Manipur has in Tripura there's only 1 or 2 vernacular medium newspaper, but one of them is extremely strong in terms of 55,000 copies being sold every day, and that's huge. In Nagaland, for reasons which I haven't been able to completely understand, the local language newspapers haven't thrived at all, and the only ones which thrived are Ao Milen and Teri more recently, and Chapi in Teni Day, right? But they haven't, I mean, I don't know about Titir Yim Yim and Ao Million, but Chapi has not been able to expand and become a full-fledged newspaper of a daily kind. So we surely have this as a major shortcoming. I cannot. I believe it might have something to do with the early translation strategies of the church figures, right? Because you see, the modern press and modern prose came to the hills with the missionaries, right? So yeah, I believe that the strategies which they adopted in translation and the way they conducted their initial, operations, it had an impact. But I did not fully understand that, because what exactly was different between the translation strategies of Mizoram and Nagaland, I don't have a first-hand idea about that. But I do feel that that this is something that needs further investigation.